Hello. Welcome, everyone. I'm Olin Moxe, Illustration Institute's assistant. Thank you for coming tonight. We're thrilled to have a dynamic duo in the house to share their experience in creating picture books for Candlewick Press, our generous sponsor for these workshops. I'm also assistant curator for the Illustration Institute's exhibits, so I'd like to remind you that our exhibit, The Art of Cute, is still on view at the Brickstore Museum in Kennebunk through Sunday, September 1st. If you haven't seen it yet, now is the time. So let me tell you a little about our speakers tonight. Jancy Dunn has a wicked fun resume, as we say in Maine, and we wish we could have her here for many more hours of storytelling about her work as a VJ at MTV and a writer for Rolling Stone, Vogue, and Oprah magazine, among others. She's also a New York Times bestselling author whose titles include Why is My Mother Getting a Tattoo? And Other Questions I Wish I Never Had to Answer. Yeah. And Cyndi Lauper, a memoir. But tonight we're going to hear how she transitioned from the world of rock stars to the world of stuffed animals as a children's book author. Scott Nash also has a wicked fun resume as a graphic designer at Corey McPherson Nash and Big Blue Dot, an award-winning illustrator of over 50 children's books. We have a link to all of our artists' resumes on our website, so be sure to check out that as well. Our next talk is by the wonderful illustrator Love is Wise on August 27th at Mecca. In the meantime, and because we are on a deadline to finish at 7 o'clock on the dot, we are thrilled to welcome Jancy Dunn and Scott Nash. What a delightful way to gain insight into the bookmaking process with these two wicked fun and wicked talented people. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So I will tell you a little bit about how I got started because I've had this very kind of meandering career that has added up to something over the years. So I was an English major, and I thought that that would be the most fun to read books for 4 years. And when I graduated, I had hoped to get a job in the magazine world, and it didn't end up that way. And I ended up working, I grew up in New Jersey, and I ended up working at an ad agency in Cranford, New Jersey, fact-checking heart medicine called CoreGuard. And I thought, is this all there is? And so I was this is a very New Jersey story, but I was at Terry Taglerini's keg party, and we were all around the keg chanting, drink, 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 and I met a woman who worked at Rolling Stone, and I thought that would be the coolest job ever, Rolling Stone magazine. And this was a while back. This was in 1989, and she put in my resume, and I didn't think I had a chance, but I wanted that job so badly, and I got it. And I was I interviewed with a man named Bob Love, isn't that a Rolling Stone name? And I was so sure it was a fluke when he hired me that I didn't ask him for 20 years why he hired me. I asked him a few years ago, we went out to lunch, and he said, it's because I could tell you would work really hard, and I did. I was the classic, I'll sweep the floor type. And so I stayed at Rolling Stone for 13 years. Can you not? Oh, yeah, okay. And he cares about the details. And what happened? And so, are you gonna come over again? So I ended up working, I ended up working for, interviewing every rock star you can think of, and I was thrown into it. And they're a different breed, and a lot of them were kind of surly, or they were on certain substances, or they were angry. And so I learned a little trick. I'm getting off the subject here, but when you interview a band, if you want them to not be surly or grunt answers at you, you pay attention only to the drummer. It's my trick. You ignore the lead singer, you ignore the lead guitarist, you even ignore the bassist. And everything the drummer says, who is usually not used to getting attention unless it was like John Bonham or somebody, you would say, go on, oh, wow, you use those sticks? Incredible, and gradually people get so upset, the rest of the band members, that you're fawning over the drummer that everyone jockeys to give you answers. So I learned many tricks like that. It's, if ever you're in that situation. So then from there, because, I wasn't necessarily, the greatest writer in the world, but I did try really hard, and I always showed up, and I learned. And so from there, I've done a million different jobs. I was a columnist at GQ magazine, and at Oprah magazine, I met people, they fanned out over New York, and then I became a VJ. Classically, I even do it now, people will call me, and if I'm in front of my computer, which inevitably I am in my apartment in Brooklyn, they'll say, hey, do you know about blah, blah, blah? And I'll be like, oh, yeah, of course I do, because I'm just Googling it madly, Oh, yeah, I can do that. I never say no to almost anything. And I'll take any assignment, because I figure I can learn something, right? And also because I want to eat. And, someone called me from Oprah magazine and said, hey, we're doing a big package on gastrointestinal problems. Do you have any? We want to do a health package. And I said, no, but I could. Because, and she said, no, we really need authentic gastrointestinal problems. I was like, oh, all right, well, there goes my $2 a word. So I went on, someone called me from MTV and said, do you want to try out to be a VJ? And I said, oh, yeah, sure, why not? Because I was just game to try anything, right? And I was so scared because I had been used to hiding behind my computer that when I tried out on camera, I broke into hives, and they said, makeup, she's hiving. I had hives on my neck. It was not a good look, like a turtleneck of hives. And, but they said, oh, you're a train wreck. You're hilarious. We'll give you the job. You're like the girl next door. So every year they renewed my contract. I would mess up, and I had this sadistic producer who would keep going like that. He would never cut anything, so if I went down a hole, kind of like I'm doing now in some ways, like rambling, he loved it. He was like, wow, you're very real. So that was my calling card, right? Not polished. So, and that's where Scott got to know me, because he watched me on the in-house Viacom cameras, when I would, a lot of incarcerated people, they would get MTV2, which is where I was a VJ. And so I would read, questions from prisoners and take requests like Free Bird from Led Zeppelin. So, from, not Led Zeppelin. See, this is happening to me. This is why I got out of the music business. Leonard Skinner, Jesus, Skinnerd. Oi. Anyway, I'm digressing. The point is, so I wrote a couple of books. I wrote Cyndi Lauper's autobiography, and that's what kind of was in my indoctrination into writing for children, because Cyndi is childlike in a really lovely way, and she just has no impulse control, and she's a great person, but she just follows her own beat, and so from there, I always wanted to write a children's book, as so many people do. It's just such a wonderful idea, isn't it? I had this vision of reading in front of kids and how great it would be. But, and when I was growing up, I knew I wanted to be a writer when I was about 6 years old. I used to write books, and I would sell them at the foot of my driveway. I had a big pile of remainders. There weren't a lot of takers, but it made me learn early, kind of, to learn humility. And so I had a child, and her name is Sylvie, and she's my daughter, and she picked up quickly that I was a good source of original material. So every night at around 9, when it was bedtime, she would say, tell me a story. No, a fresh story. And I'd be like, oh, this is exactly what I want to be doing at this time of night, but okay. So she had, because as Nora Ephron said, everything is copy, right? And I remember thinking, this could be a kid's book. She would say, tell me the Teddy story again and again and again. And when she left for school, when she left for preschool, she would say, Mommy, when I left for school, my teddy bear was on the bed, but when I came home, the teddy bear was on the floor. I think he was doing something while I was away. And I can remember when I was a child, I absolutely thought that my stuffed animals were real and they had rich inner lives. And so I said, that's a good idea for a story. Why don't we do that? So I made up this story about how her teddy bear would kind of surreptitiously call all of her friends' stuffed animals, and they had a big old party. And then they would quickly clean up before she came home. And every night, the antics got wilder and wilder, and she loved it because she's a very rule follower, kind of. And the idea of the stuffed animals going a little bit berserk was immensely appealing for her. And so, again, because everything's copy and I have an agent, I thought, well, maybe I'll write it up and send it off. What the hey, you know? And I wrote up it's about 500 words. And I sent it off thinking, oh, my kid likes it. And I read it to a couple of her friends, and they loved it. And to my astonishment, and this isn't false humility, Candlewick bought it. And again, it was that Bob Love feeling like, what, really, are you sure? You know, I didn't want to. And so it was very interesting because it was a brand new world for me. I was very familiar with book publishing, with magazine publishing. I write for newspapers. I knew that world, but this was different, and it was fascinating. First of all, they scrutinize every single word, and they look at it from different angles. For instance, the original title they came up with was, "I'm afraid your teddy has been naughty today," and it's because I love the word naughty. And even when my child was a kid, you know, when she was really little, I'd say, "Are you being naughty?" And it's just my favorite word. But someone in the marketing department Googled naughty and teddy. And who knew people even wore teddies anymore? Is that like a thing, you know? But they said, no, can't go with this. So we changed it to, right? And we changed it to, "I'm afraid your teddy is in trouble today." And that came also from when I would be in the children's book section with my daughter, you know, when she was little and just starting to learn to read. I myself loved a good grabber of a title, and if I saw that title, I would have grabbed that book immediately because, ooh, what's he doing, you know? And Corduroy was one of my favorite books when I was a kid, and I just loved that whole idea. So every single word scrutinized, and even now, you know, we're working on a second book, Scott and I heard back from my editor, "Hi, one of your characters is Miss Crimple, and another is Mr. Fankel, and that sounds too much alike. Can you come up with a different last name?" And I thought, wow, they're granular like that, like down to that. And you have to be careful even with last names. You know, you don't want to offend anybody, and so I did a poll. I often poll kids. They're my best crowdsource. And we used real names, and I sent back a list of names that make kids giggle for whatever reason. And I hope no one has the last name of Shufflebottom in here, which is a real name, but that's what we went with. They were pleased by that. And so the plot is that Teddy phones up a couple of his friends, or texts them, I think, and then all the stuffed animals come over and they have a wild party. And some authors will tell you, "I don't take from my own life, it comes right out of my own head." Well, I take directly from my own life. And I remember we have a very small Brooklyn apartment, and my child, when she has play dates over, one of the things that they love is they would make a cushion mountain of all the couch and chair cushions, and then they took, when they were really little, cookie sheets, and they would slide down Cushion Mountain in my house. I'm that mom, you know, like in the other room, like looking up shoe websites while they're destroying my house. But I was one of the most popular moms in town. So that went in there, and all the mayhem that the Teddy would kind of wreak, it often came from suggestions from kids. And because I'm a researcher, whenever I do any work, I plunge into research. I over-research. I can't help it. I don't want to be caught out. And also, just because it's fun. And so I thought, okay, if Teddy wreaks havoc kind of, you know, while the kid is away, is that going to, you know, prompt children to misbehave and wreak havoc on their own? So I asked around, you know, I interview, because I write for Oprah a lot, I interview a lot of psychologists, social psychologists, child psychologists. So I asked a bunch of child psychologists, including the head of the Yale Parenting Center, is this okay? You know, is this a bad lesson? Because in this world, you know, you want to be careful about the lessons you're imparting. And he said, are you kidding? It is a child's wish to defy their parents, but they want to please their parents. And so if the Teddy's misbehaving, it's a safe outlet for them. You know, and it's so true. And he said, and children love to be self-righteous. Oh, I would never do that. I mean, even now, when I, you know, I mean, even as adults, we like to be self-righteous too, right? And he was even saying, you as an adult, you know, if you gossip, that's like a social norm that you're enforcing. Oh, I'm not going to cheat on my husband, you know, and it's the same kind of thing. And so he said, no, it's very safe. Go for it, you know. So I felt a little bit better about that. And so then another thing that I learned with Cyndi Lauper is she has a musical ear. She doesn't write music, she just does it in her brain. And in fact, when she had a 300-word manuscript, a 300-page manuscript, I had to read it to her aloud. She's like, I'm not really a reader, just read it to me aloud, and I'll just raise my hand if something's wrong. And so it took months, I lost my voice. But it kind of taught me in a weird way the musicality of speech when you're speaking, you know? And so I would read, it was 500 words, which isn't very much, but I would read it aloud and read it aloud and read it aloud until it all made sense to my ear somehow. So that was another interesting thing. And then afterwards, you know, it was funny when I read it aloud to kids, afterwards I say, because I like to, again, crowdsource, and I would say, like, well, what else should Teddy do? And every single time I make an appearance, one child will raise their hand and say, maybe Teddy could make good choices. So I think sometimes, I'm like, I don't know if that'll sell necessarily. It might not sell. Teddy makes good choices. I mean, it could, I guess. Well, you know, maybe parents would buy that for the kids, right? But, so they loved the mayhem. And because I had, you know, Scott may talk about this, you know, also is sometimes when there's a separate writer and an illustrator, they don't necessarily like you to communicate. And I do see why. I have a lot of friends who are authors. My husband is an author. And, you know, we can be neurotic. And that might drive an illustrator crazy. And just because you have something in your brain and they don't, you know, envision it the same way, it just doesn't seem fair. But I wanted to talk to him so badly, so we did. We broke through the wall, and it was on Facebook, and he said, "Come on, let's talk." Right? It was on Facebook, and then we talked on the phone, and we were so simpatico, and it was great. So so that was kind of my journey to writing a kids book, and it's been so lovely to do kids events because I've been used to the Q&As that I get at adult readings. I've done 5 books, and but kids, they'll ask you anything. I always get, how old are you? And then one time I got, and I said, oh yeah, you in the Minecraft shirt. Have you ever been bitten by a shark? And I said, not yet. And of course that sent off a whole, you know, how about a lion? You know, and then there was a lot of other biting questions. And another time when I did a reading in New Jersey, where I'm from, I went to my elementary school. It was the happiest moment of my life. And there was a child who kept his hand on my knee the whole time, which was very comforting. You know, he was like 4, and it was like his little warm hand. And then I usually get nervous. You know, I'm babbling now. There's always a little bit of nerves. But it was so sweet. So his question was, you know, and I said, you know, you with the Minecraft T-shirt again, have you ever been to the Chuck E. Cheese in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania? And I said, no, I haven't. I'm clearly not living my best life, right? So he recommended the wings, and that also prompted discussion. And my favorite thing is when, you know, when I go visit at schools, I'll say, what's the signal that every principal or teacher has to quiet down the kids? Because the kids get very excited, you know. The most common is probably, yeah, so that's what we go with. But sometimes it's eating marshmallows. So it's just this really sweet world. And even when I can remember I did one event where only parents showed up with babies. And I thought, all right, you know, I'll go with it, I guess. I don't know. The babies were definitely pre-verbal, and then I realized, oh, the parents want to be entertained, you know? So they wanted story time. They were so fried. And they were so punchy and so sleep deprived that they were laughing at all the jokes in the book. It was great. So anyway, after I had talked to Scott, I was really mindful when I was writing to put in, I can remember when I was a kid, reading books, I loved ones that were really rich in their illustrations where you could look and each time you would see something different. And there would be little things that you missed each time and you would see them again. And so I was writing that with Scott in mind because I knew he would do a fabulous job of putting in a million things. And even now when I'm reading it, I find little bits that I haven't seen before. And I know that's what a child loves as well. So it's been, if I could, I would just do children's books. But as, Scott and Nancy and I were talking about that today. If you want to be in this job, I'm very frank about it, and I'll be frank with you, I have a million different things that I'm doing at all times in order to pay my bills. I review books. I write quietly for a hospital chain website. I do health stories, I write for AARP magazine. I write for anybody. Cat fancy? Bring it. You pay me a good word rate, I'm in. And it can be a little hairy sometimes. And sometimes my husband Tom and I, sometimes people don't call, and you're thinking, oh God, a couple months will pass. So we're making it work, but it definitely, we pay our own health care, we pay our own health insurance, and my father worked at JCPenney, and so he cannot fathom why we do what we do. He supports me, but he has a pension now. He's retired, and he had a health care plan. He had everything, and so, the trade-off is that it's a really wonderful job, but I would say the one downside is that there can be months where we can't pay our bills, and then something comes in, and I'll do a story on gastrointestinal problems, and everything will be fine, But anything you want to ask me during the Q&A, I really will happily answer. I have no filter whatsoever, and yeah, that's a good thing. Whenever people tell me that they have no filter in my interview subjects, I'm like, ooh, giddy, All right, so did you want to come up here, Scott? So for the next book, we had, again, it just came directly from the kids, and I just saw how they got animated when it was at a school. And my sister is a teacher, and she helped me out a lot. She's a third grade teacher, and I love teachers. And I would say things like, Heather, can you go to your principal's office? I need a poster on the wall of the principal's office, preferably an inspirational poster. Come back and tell me what your principal's, poster said. And she would say, okay, hang on. And then she'd come back and she'd say, dream big. And I would say, yes, of course, dream big. And, and then I would say, okay, what about your gym coach? What did he say? In my day, it was Coach Sherman. I can't remember, did we leave Coach Sherman? Was it Coach Sherman or someone else? I think it was Coach Sherman. Yeah, I think it was. I said, what does he yell to all the students to get them to behave? And she said, hang on, I'll be right back. 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. And so I think that made it in 2. And, again, we went with, again, using a template, I'm afraid your Teddy is in the principal's office. And we didn't want children to get too upset thinking Teddy was really in trouble. But, I think they can, if there's a little bit of peril and it's very safe and soft, it's a good thing. And at the end, everything works out okay. At the end of the first book, you can see there's like a little visual pun because, another thing that we did that, I'm sorry, see, this is the way my whole career went. I was like, it all adds up in kind of an impressionistic way, right, to what where was I? Tom, what was I saying? Visual pun. So at the end, thank you, Teddy is, what we wanted to do is to not have a child in the book that you could see. And that was, I love the idea of a child being able to put themselves in a book. And so we had a policeman, 2 policemen, which was Scott's idea, and he'll tell you about it, kind of showing up at a house and saying, oh, your Teddy got in trouble today. And that you never saw the child, you just saw the people addressing the child. Because I remember what it was like you want to be in the book, you want to be directly in there. So it was a way for a child to participate. And we wanted to make the policemen, stern but friendly. And then to make them human, halfway through the book, the policeman says, we ended up making it a policewoman, also Scott's idea. And she said, oh, I remember when I was a kid. Oh, I had a teddy bear too. Teddy looks a lot like you. All right, you can go. But then at the end, just to keep the cheekiness, because we didn't want it too sweet, you can see that Teddy's clutching a phone. And the last line is, all right, go in there and clean up. Now, you be good now. And Teddy's winking, and he's got a phone. So he's up to, a little more mayhem next time. But again, safe mayhem. And so it's been the most satisfying thing I've ever done. Like the world of children's books, there's no cranky rock stars or, it's just, people really, their hearts are in the right place. And it's just, I remember when I first met Scott face to face, we went to a Candlewick party. And I remember saying to the publicist, did I even tell you this, Scott? I said to Phoebe, the publicist, all right, who do I have to get to know here? Who, just point me towards who I have to talk to, and I'll get, is there like book sales? And she was like, okay, let's take it down a notch. This is the children's book world. We don't need to like be a shark and head over to, a person. And so I just had to just relax and talk about, children's books with other authors, and it was delightful. So I hope that I can continue. And again, I wish I could do it full time, but the other stuff is very fun too, and very interesting. And so I think that's all I have for now. But again, you store up those questions, and at the end, you ask me anything. It's very quiet here. We can do what we like, right? And I'll happily answer. Okay. Oh, thank you.
No, I've never done
Yeah, it's a good one, yeah. Do I stand over here?
Wherever you like. You can be right back here if you want.
Like behind you?
No. Hold on one second. Let me. There is this convention of, publishers do try to keep a wall between the authors and the illustrators, but when you've got somebody like Jancy, why would you do that? It's been delightful working with her right from the get-go, and she's been a catalyst for a lot of new ideas. 1 second here. And one more. Okay. Okay, there we go. I also just wanted to say that a little bit more about that convention of not talking to the author. I've broken down that wall many times, and it's every time I found it to be hugely beneficial because I'm used to collaborating. I come from the world of animation, and where it's a very collaborative process, and it's just great to have a conversation back and forth. I mean, so much of what we do is electronic, and I think I drove you a little bit nuts. I would call you and say, what do you think about this and that? And the ideas would just build. It was great to have collaborators. I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to talk about the new book mostly, and a little bit about the initial book that I did with Jancy. But I also want to sort of talk a little bit about my approach to illustration and my influences in illustration. And I call this the nostalgia part of the talk, which is where I'm coming from. I'm going to show you some of the illustrators that I really admire from my past. Like Jancy, both she and I have a real love and interest in using either animals that are animate in some way, they become characters, they become surrogates for children, they become toys, I think, in many ways are the basis for ideas and storytelling with kids. I can think of many hours, maybe in some ways inspired by Ernest Shepard and Winnie the Pooh, the idea that these toys are imbued with stories and they just need to come out. And I think it's probably common in a number of us that we played for hours and hours with stuffed animals and action figures. And it wasn't, I grew up in a childhood where it wasn't, sort of pre-created sets of things. We would mix and match, teddy bears with superheroes. And just sort of, that became part of the storytelling. And I think it's part of the wonder. It's one of the reasons I'm so taken by the idea of either animating stuffed animals or creating anthropomorphic animals in stories. This is Ernest Shepard. He's sort of the illustrator that I want to be someday. I love the spontaneity of his line. I love the pathos in these characters. You just, in just a few simple lines, sort of fall in love with these. And I also like the sort of incongruities in some of these drawings, the dot eyes, which are so expressive and simple. I think actually brings, with simple faces, I think we sort of bring more of ourselves into the character, but then have Rabbit here with eyes that are a little bit more cartoony. Edward Ardizione, who's another favorite of mine in that he does sort of impressionistic drawings that are not terribly specific, but they're beautifully rendered and give you sort of evoke a sense of the place. Edward Gorey, for a myriad of reasons. I absolutely love his work. I actually, as I've been following Edward Gorey's work for many years, I like the more unconventional stuff. I love discovering things like this. Teddy, we've got a Teddy theme going here. And then Garth Williams. I think this is masterful work. This is a picture from The Cricket in Times Square, which I think is one of the greatest children's books ever written. I absolutely love this. And this is an example of the sort of illustrator that, again, that I would like to be. I think that this is a magnificent drawing in that he's done something kind of strange and awkward with this character, with Milo. Instead of Milo looking adoringly at Chester, like what you would see in sort of conventional illustrations with a kid like holding his hands up against his face, he's got his face down on the newspaper with one arm stretched out this way so he can be as close as he can possibly be to Chester the cricket. And it's a beautiful image. When I'm sketching, that's how I work. I work in a very immediate sort of way. These are just random ideas for various narratives that I'm building. And this is how I sketch. This is a Hob riding, actually this is our dog Zephyr. And it's a story that I'm developing called The Makers. But these sort of direct line drawings are sort of where I am at my core. Very spontaneous, not overly fussed over. What I'm trying to be as I grow as an illustrator is get beyond trying to have any modicum of perfection and really go with the spontaneous drawings. And these are the images that I use in my my novels because I think I love the way that they complement. Oh, that's a different sort of image. I like the way they complement the text and don't get in the way of the text. That said, I also love to do picture books, and this style isn't necessarily right for picture books. It can be a little bit edgy, a little terrifying in this case. This is a poster for an exhibition that we did a couple of years ago called Wake Up Alice. But I also have a love back into the nostalgia realm for any number of illustrators from the past this stuff feels very, very fresh to me. This stuff feels it feels very fresh, and it also feels like it's more appropriate in some ways for picture books. This is Johnny Gruel's work for Raggedy Ann and Andy, another marvelous series of books that feature stuffed animals really emoting and really working with one another and creating adventures together. And this sort of style became sort of the basis for the way I sort of approach picture books, because I wanted to introduce a simpler line, not an overly fussed over line with bright colors. I find these completely captivating. This is another Johnny Gruelle image of Raggedy Ann. And these things, I have a visceral love for these because partially because I did grow up with them, but also I just think they're magnificently conceived. This is Harrison Cady, another illustrator that I adore. And then this is me. This was done in years ago. It's the start of my illustration career. And I did this for American Girl. I worked for, we all have interesting jobs. So, you know, I did work for a period of time with MTV and Nickelodeon. I also was a regular contributor to American Girl. I did a column, I illustrated a column called Help, which was essentially letters from the girls that were inevitably upset about something. In this case, this is a girl who's afraid of the dark. And I did this for many years, and it was great practice to take sort of simple ideas and illustrate them. But this one sort of really resonated. I got a lot of sort of reaction to this. I actually did, I sort of used this as a promotion for my early illustration and was very successful with it. People really enjoyed this particular image. And you can see that there's references from the aforementioned Johnny Gruelle and Harrison Cady and such. You're seeing some of those characters. And again, what I love about these characters, as opposed to stuffed animals that are sort of contemporary stuffed animals, is that they're fairly simply stated. And again, my theory is that the more simply stated a face, the more you bring some of your character to these individual animals. And so this becomes a basis for some of what eventually turns into my work with Jancy. I have built sort of one portion of my career has been stories with animate stuffed animals. This one's called Tough Fluff, The Case of Ducky's Missing Brain. Once again, I love the idea of bringing something that's slightly irreverent, not necessarily sort of your traditional character. This was actually a fairly popular book. It was sort of noir meets stuffed animals. Basically, he's sort of gumshoe detective that works in a place up in the attic, up in a place called Lost Attic, where stuffs and action figures sort of live together. And this is a mystery about a character named Ducky whose brain has gone missing. But these are the sort of images that, again, resonate with me, and they would show you a little bit of the background of some of my artwork that does connect with stuffed animals. So I'm afraid your teddy has been naughty today. I got that right? This is right? Has been, yeah, but this is before we changed it. So this came over the transom from Candlewick, and I had a Samuel L. Jackson moment on this. I don't know if you know this story, but Samuel L. Jackson said that when he was offered to be the lead in Snakes on a Plane, he took the job based on the title alone. And I sort of had the same feeling about this. I was like, I want to work on this. This is my sort of thing. For many reasons. And then I read through the text and realized, yeah, this is something that I need to work on. This was the initial cover concept for I'm Afraid Your Teddy Has Been Naughty Today. Suffice to say, it was not accepted. But I wanted to show it to you because I dearly love it. And I think Jancy loved this one as well, but it wasn't going to fly. But I love him holding that teddy sign for his mugshot. And then what I do when I get a project like this, I start developing very loose drawings for the characters. In my sketchbooks, as you know, I use sketchbooks as a way of developing stories and sort of getting immersed in the storytelling. So this is, the other thing that's great about working with Jancy, one of many things that's great about working with Jancy is that she was so damn specific in what needed to be included in this narrative. And I'll like there was a giraffe mentioned. There's there's an elephant mentioned, and I just was eating this stuff up. And there was actually, what I didn't notice in the initial manuscript is that it said there are some scenes where there needed to be 25 stuffed animals jumping on a bed. So I had to develop 25 characters, which actually was a joy for me. It's this stuffed elephant. This is my sketching process. This is I don't think I have the actual finished illustration of this, but this is my sketch of the sofa mountain that Jancy was referring to. I don't know if you can even see what's in this. I like these drawings, though. There's the teddy up on top, sitting on a tray. There's a penguin on a tray. These are what I use as the basis for my drawings, for the final drawings, and I try to maintain as much of the energy of these sketches in the final drawings. This is the 25 animals jumping. This is a detail of 25 animals jumping on a bed. This is in there because for some reason, while I was working on this particular book, I was watching, the movie Paprika? I don't know, the anime movie Paprika. There are these scenes with just tons of these visually rich images of all different sorts of toys, statues, bouncing around, and this became sort of set the tone for the energy of some of the illustrations throughout this book. And then these are just more energy drawings, dancing stuffed animals, which are profoundly creepy, but I love them. More of the same. This is the police officers entering into the party scene, and these are all, there's the giraffe and such. These you may not be seeing much in these, but they mean everything to me. I actually use these as the basis for all the drawings. And this is the animals getting together and making not just pancakes, but pancakes with blueberries, whipped cream, and sprinkles, which became the image. This is the image from the poster. This is the final art. I'm pretty proud of that pancake, by the way, and I think Jancy liked it as well. And this is the 25 animals bouncing on a bed, and it was an absolute joy to work on these. And you can see, I hope I've maintained some of the energy and some of the collage sort of quality in the final art. I work very directly from those sketches. I'm afraid your Teddy is in the principal's office. Gave me a whole new challenge because I love the idea of these animals suddenly wreaking havoc on a school setting. It seemed perfect to me. I start out by developing characters, and this is the principal. And I thought, well, Jancy and I had a discussion about how the principal should be conveyed. Shouldn't be too sort of marmish, too square. So I actually, and we were determined that it was going to be African-American woman. And my model for this, is Brittany Holmes from the Alabama Shakes, rather. And she became the model for this. I think that she has just got the most beautiful open face. I didn't really look at Brittany as I was drawing this character, but she was the basis for that character. And this is the aforementioned Coach Sherman, who's based on this guy. I mean, just this Coach Sherman exists, as it turns out, and those shorts just killed me. So there's Coach Sherman, and then Mr. What's his name now? Is it still Crimple? Still Crimple. We still got Crimple here, which the publisher thought this guy looked a little too young to be an assistant to the principal, but I pointed out that there are a lot of young faces in schools as well. So I wanted to have somebody I wanted to have a character that was sympathetic to the kids as they're reading through this, and the Teddy is getting reprimanded by the principal. And then, now this name's changed, right? This is real-time stuff.
No, it's still the same.
Okay, it's the same. And I offered these two, and there was no trouble making a decision They wouldn't even consider the bald guy. This guy is based on Bob Ross and my brother. So this is how I sketch. This is how the layouts are done. I really do draw on these sort of these roughly conceived drawings. I'm currently working digitally, which is really interesting for me. The tools have gotten so I sort of went into the digital realm kicking and screaming, kind of really kicking and screaming. I didn't want to be. I didn't want to move away from paper. But this is really conducive to the way I work. I like drawing right on top of rough sketches, and being able to work in layers really does help me sort of conceive of the picture, of the scenes, and I hope give the characters a little bit of life. I also do crazy things like I will set up, stuffed animals as models. This actually inspired, this is a little bit of a digression, this inspired a workshop that I love to do. I love working with kids and doing sort of drawing programs. And I thought drawing from stuffed animals was great, especially in these sort of dramatic poses. And actually put together a seminar called Life Drawing Stuffed Animals and Action Figures, which was hugely satisfying. And it was actually, this sounds really silly to do something like this, but kids really were able to sort of think about, it's a great way to sort of teach figure drawing because you're able to sort of figure out the general shapes of a stuffed animal, and they were doing a lot of keen observational drawing. I mean, look at that kid on the left there. They did some spectacular sketches. When I'm working on a project, I was trying to think about how I go about, working on illustrations, and a lot of times completing the illustrations for a book takes a few months, can take a couple of months for me. And I find myself, this sort of new quirk of mine, which is that I find myself listening to specific soundtracks for specific books. Like my book, Blue Jay the Pirate, The High Seas Adventures of Blue Jay the Pirate, I listened exclusively to Mendelssohn. And then for a book that I was doing that was called the Magic Milk Carton, it's all John Coltrane. The music for Jancy's book, our book together, is this, Tune Yards. I'm just throwing this out there. I would listen to Tune Yards because it's upbeat. I don't know if you're familiar with Merle Garbus's music, but it's this crazy sort of upbeat stuff. Talking Heads, nonstop. It's been, it's buoyant sort of music. I love I was like sort of digging into, music I haven't listened to Talking Heads in years. But there's the one song where I don't have to prove that I am creative. I'm painting. I don't know if you know that song, but that was, I'm painting again. John Hartford. And this band, Girl Talk, which was recommended to me by Mark Ulrichsen. We were talking about what sort of music drives us as we're playing, and he said, if you're on a deadline and you really need something to help you along that's legal, he said Girl Talk is what to listen to. And it is the catchiest stuff. I feel a little guilty about the fact that I do love this because it's just a stream of catchy riffs. And it does, I have to tell you, I will recommend this if you are on a deadline and you're feeling like you don't have the energy for getting it accomplished, just try it. Try Girl Talk. And then I'd like to end, I want to show you just a sneak peek of the illustrations for I'm Afraid Your Teddy's in the Principal's Office. And I want to tell you, this is like a reality show in some ways, or no, this is real life. Jancy has not seen these. These are all the images that my deadline for these illustrations is today. And so here we go. I hope you like them. This is the cover, not quite, what's that? She doesn't look, she's smiling, I think. This is the proposal for the cover. I think it says everything. This is the front and... I do. Thank you for asking. I love rendering type badly. This is the front and back cover. These are the flaps. This is the dust jacket. So we're going to have the principal on one side and the teddy all painted up. It's sort of little peek into what's going to happen. And I'm going to give you sort of the general narrative here. And I love how this woman's mind works, by the way. The premise here is that the stuffed animals have decided that they would hitch a ride. They organized and decided that they're going to hitch a ride in the backpacks of about 100 kids. and they escape, and they run like crazy through the halls, which I just love to no end that I'm getting to draw stuff like this. And I was able to, though I generally don't make references to, I try to keep the time period in this fairly sort of neutral, but I couldn't resist actually using some backpacks that I did some research on and sort of did modifications of these fantastic backpacks that are available for kids. This is a cow face, there's an owl there, there's a Godzilla. I mean, these have been doctored a little bit, but they're sort of inspired by actual backpacks. And then, and again, this is what Jancy comes up with, okay? Their first stop was to go into the cafeteria, and they raided the cafeteria and sort of demanded food, but they also, and we haven't talked about this, but this is one of the specs, is that one of the bad things that the stuffed animals did is that they made a sculpture out of Sloppy Joe mix. It's like, how do you make a sculpture out of Sloppy Joe? So that's my attempt of creating a sculpture of Sloppy Joe mix. Thank you, Jancy. And then, and this is missing things. This is missing type, obviously, but then they start using pizzas as frisbees and making mustaches out of pasta. I didn't make this stuff up. Jancy made it up. So, and then they wrote their names, sort of tagged the walls using ketchup, mustard, and mayonnaise. And the monkey there is, yeah. And then our principal is constantly giving Mr. Crimple trouble for chuckling about various things. Then they headed to the gym and sort of took over the gym, and I sort of tease out what is going to happen next. We have a jump rope and this character hiding behind the bleachers, and then they tie up. I had a good time. I had a good time with Coach Sherman. Thank you very much. And then they headed to the band room, and they put soap bubbles into all of the brass instruments. And in this case, I just focused on the brass instruments themselves and the bubbles. And then, this is probably my favorite, they broke into the teacher's room. And we talked back and forth about this has got to be a special teacher's room with barricades and cameras, and they're all looking for, these are lookouts, and the monkeys interrupting the camera. And then I decided, well, what am I going to do? What are we going to do with the teacher's room? Well, I didn't need to think about it because Jancy came up with the ideas, which was that there should be a climbing wall, a trampoline, ice cream, and I just love this woman. On the trampoline there. And then they went into the art room and they set a glue trap for the art teacher, and he walked in and he's got a very neat, he's very proud of the fact that he has a neat art room. And they're of course enjoying seeing him being caught in the trap. And I put up, some Kandinsky images, some modern art images, which is as you would see in a kid's art room. And then all sorts of craziness happens. They roll in paint. They throw themselves up against the wall. This is what I love to do. And then they escape out the window using pipe cleaners as a rope. And I hope this is convincing. I actually love that little spot of her holding the pipe cleaner escape rope, and then they chase them down through the grounds, and then they're brought in. Justice. This is all of them, looking dejected. And then, as Jancy said, as happened in the first book, the principal recognizes that this is a teddy that's very similar to one that she had as a kid. And this is my depiction of the principal as a child reading trickster tales and to what looks to be a very content teddy bear. And that's a close-up of that one. And then in the end, she gets a big hug and the animals rejoice. And I'm hoping the editors will allow me to have the paint on the principal's face. I'm hoping so. And those are the images for Teddy.